Thank you, everybody, for coming. One thing the governor was asking about, where's Joni? Joni! Joni! We need Joni. We need to hear her squeal. We will not start this meeting. All right, we'll get her in a minute. Thank you all. Thank you, everybody, for coming and being here on this cold day at Kirkwood Community College here in Cedar Rapids. You know, this is a very, very special place, but we've got a very special person with us today. Ah, there she is. This is now an official Cedar Rapids event. Joni. Thank you so much. Thanks all of you for all that you do. This is a very special person. This is going to be the next President of the United States. Just one story before I give him the microphone. I had a reporter call me yesterday. They're writing an article about Governor Romney, a profile of Governor Romney. They said, you know, there's something special about him. You know, I follow all the candidates that have traipsed through Iowa over the past year and a half. And you know, some of them do okay in the morning, and some aren't so good. And some do okay at night, and some aren't so good. But you know, this guy is good all the time. All the time. How does he do it? How does he do it? Now, this is true. He asked me this. And I said, you know, I think he's got an inner source of energy. An inner source of energy that taps the American spirit. Because he understands the importance of his task and the important role he's going to play in leading our country at a time of critical national security, at a critical time of economic security, and at a critical time when our values are threatened. And it's because of that, I am very, very proud to introduce to you the next President of the United States, Mitt Romney.
Thank you, and Doug, thank you for all your help. Doug Gross, who's chaired my campaign in Iowa, has been up and down the state working with me, and it's an honor to have him here today and to introduce me. And we all had to say hi to Joni, but Renee is out there, and Kathy, and a lot of other folks. Joni has this high squeal that if she's in the room, you know she's here. So when I heard her when we was welcomed, that I didn't hear that squeal, I thought Joni can't be here, but she's out in the hall welcoming people, and I appreciate that, Joni. This is a big crowd for the middle of the day here at Kirkwood. I appreciate the willingness of the community college to open its doors. There must be, I don't know, 200 and well, more than that people here. And I wonder what they told you to get you here. There's no lunch. My guess is someone lied. That's you know the old story about the politician who had a bit of a problem with the truth. He's 70 years old. And he shows up one day, he's been always single, he shows up one day at the country club with a 25-year-old girl holding onto his arm. And the fellows at the club say, come here, you know, what's going on here? How'd you find that 25-year-old girl to go out with you? He said, we're not on a date, we're married. He said, you're kidding, how did you get a 25-year-old girl to marry a 70-year-old politician? And he said, well, I lied about my age. And they said, what'd you do, tell her you were 50? He said, no, I told her I was 90. Well, I want to talk to you today. Oh yeah. I want to talk to you today about the process of running for president. I didn't know I was going to be doing this. I started off my life as you have, as a little guy in a home with some terrific parents, and went to school and fell in love in school with my high school sweetheart. We're still going steady. I think it's going to last. And actually, as a result of some of the experiences I've had in my life, I now find myself in a position where I can run and am running for the presidency of the United States. Why do it? How in the world? This is not my career. I didn't spend my life planning on getting into politics. I spent 25 years in business, and there were good times and bad times. I started with a consulting firm, and it had good times and some pretty scary times, and I was able to help get it turned around. And then I started my own business, small, which grew to be very large. And by virtue of those experiences, I got asked to go off and run the Olympic Games out in Salt Lake City, Utah, when they were in deep trouble, to help turn them around. And together with a remarkable team of people, we did just that. And then when I was finished with that, some friends in Massachusetts that were Republican asked me to come back and run for governor of Massachusetts. It's not easy to win in Massachusetts as a Republican conservative in probably the bluest state in America, but I was lucky at the time, in a manner of speaking. The state had enormous financial challenges, and I said I would not raise taxes, I would cut back on spending. And that is a very defining issue in this country, particularly as our nation keeps spending more and more and more money, adding more and more debt, adding more and more obligations. As we see the dollar become weaker and weaker, people wonder, why is it that people around the world don't think a lot about the future value of the dollar? And it's in part because they see that we can't control our spending. And so I came into a state that had a spending problem, and I said I wouldn't raise taxes, and people knew that my Democratic opponent was most likely to do that. It was a tougher job than I expected, though, because when I ran for office, we thought the gap was going to be about $1 billion in our budget. I remember in the last debate, Tim Russert of Meet the Press was the questioner, the commentator, and he said, Governor Romney, how are you going to close that $1 billion budget gap? And I had a pretty good idea the question was coming, because I'd seen him moderate a debate in Florida a few weeks before, and he'd asked the same question there. And one of the guys, in answering the question there, gave him a bunch of numbers, but Tim was adding them up on a piece of paper, surreptitiously, and then he turned afterwards and said, it doesn't add up. And I thought, okay, I better have my numbers straight. So we worked with my team to make sure that I really could come up with $1 billion of savings, because it was going to be pretty hard to come up with that kind of a number. Well, we got the question, I gave him the answer, and after I won the election, my chief financial advisor, who became my Secretary of Administration and Finance Administration, came in and talked to me. He said, I got some bad news and some good news. I said, give me the good news first. So the good news is that we do not have a $1 billion budget problem. Yeah. The bad news is it's a $3 billion budget problem. And in fact, we may have some difficulty with cash flow. That means our ability to meet our obligations just over the next couple of months. And so we had to go to work to find ways to balance our budget. And the place we focused was on spending. Now, a lot of other governors around the country face similar circumstances. And they said, no, they're just going to raise taxes. I said, we're not going to raise taxes. I told people I wouldn't do it. And so we cut back on spending. I went through agency after agency. We had some places like Health and Human Services with 15 different agencies, and we brought them together, consolidated them to about 4 different groupings. We also took agencies like, we had one Parks Department, and we put it together with the other Parks Department. I looked to put together our highway departments and combined some of them. Actually, one commentator, TV commentator, said Governor Romney didn't just go after the sacred cows, he went after the whole herd. And we found ways to balance our budget, cutting out excessive spending, and ultimately by the end of the first year, we'd actually created a surplus. In all 4 years I was governor, we balanced our budget. And by the end of my 4 years, we not only had balanced the budget every year, we had built a rainy day fund of over $2 billion. Wow. That's what... Now, if there's ever been a time we needed somebody to go to Washington that knows how to rein in excessive spending, it's now. Because Washington's spending too much money. I've already said that one thing I do is set a cap. I'd say on non-military discretionary spending, I'm going to set a cap at inflation less 1%, so below inflation. And if I get appropriations that are above that amount, I will veto them. In addition, I'll do something that I've done in the business world time and time again. And that is, I'll take a look at everything Washington is doing, or the enterprise is doing, review all the programs in the departments, top to bottom, and say, do we have to keep doing that? Is it a need to have or just a nice to have? Are there ways to make it more economic and more efficient? Can we take out duplication and waste? Can we eliminate the program altogether? And so I'll go through government, probably starting with the Department of Defense, where the number of programs and the excess is reputed to be in the billions and billions of dollars, and find ways to economize and make sure that we spend our money where it's needed most. There's some places, of course, where we're not going to cut back in our total spending, and the military is probably one of them. This is one of the times when we need not less strength, but greater strength in America. And I will do my very best to add additional troops to our military, to give them the equipment they need on the battlefield, and by the way, to give our veterans the care they deserve when they come home. Now, you know that we face some very important challenges and issues in this country right now. I hope you recognize that. We're spending too much money, as I indicated. Our domestic problems include the fact that we're using too much oil. Did you see the snowman come in here just a minute ago? Did you see that? In the costume? I hope he's coming back. Maybe not, but I saw the snowman come in. I thought, it's great to have Al Gore here in costume. You know that? But our overuse of oil is a problem. Our overuse of foreign oil is a problem. The fact that we send $1 billion a day outside of our country to nations, in many cases, that use that money against us, it makes no sense. Not for our economy, not for our foreign policy, and probably not for our environment either. And so for a lot of reasons, that's another major problem we've got to tackle. Our schools are leaving a lot of kids behind. I happen to think that's the civil rights issue of the current time we live in. Healthcare, we've got 47 million people that don't have health insurance. That doesn't make sense to me. So we've got domestic challenges. And then we have challenges that come from overseas. Global jihad being the greatest in my view. This idea that there are people in the world of Islam, it's a narrow slice of Islam, but they want to bring down all moderate nations, cause the collapse of the West, cause the collapse of modernity within those Islamic nations that have modern governments. And in my view, this represents an enormous threat to the future of the world and civilization at large. And then another challenge, which is of a different nature, and that's how hard it is to compete with a new competitor, China. They're tough. Asia's coming out of poverty. That's great, but China is tough. And they don't respect our patents and our designs like they ought to. They manipulate their currency in such a way that their products are priced artificially low, which means that we start buying more of their products, and as we do so, why it means that people who are selling those kinds of products and building those products in our country are finding their business going away because we start buying things that are coming from China. We've got to do a better job if we want to stay ahead of Asia and China long term. So we've got challenges, domestic challenges, the challenge of global jihad, the challenge of emerging China, Asia, India, other nations. And there's some people who, when they face all those challenges, immediately think government. We've got to have government take over. And that's the way, well, I guess if you spent your whole life in government, that's what you'd think. You have Barack Obama and John Edwards and Hillary Clinton. Oh yeah, can't forget those three. All three United States senators, they focused their life on government or suing people. And so when they see the kind of challenges we face, they think of government. Now when I see the kind of challenges we think, I don't think let's put more government in. I say, how can we make sure that we solve those problems in the way that Ronald Reagan solved the challenges of our last century? Facing the great threat of global communism and the reach of the Soviet Union, he said the best way to defeat the Soviet Union is to strengthen America. And that was his policy. He said we need to be a stronger America with a stronger military and with a strong economy so we can simply outcompete the Russians, the Soviets, and with strong values and optimism so that we give our kids the skills they need to be successful in the new global economy. That's the path Ronald Reagan chose. And I want to make sure that we continue to live in the house that Ronald Reagan built. I want to strengthen America. It's my philosophy not to take a left turn to follow down the pathway of the Europe of old with big government and big taxes and big brother, but instead to strengthen America such that we can overcome the challenges we have. I'd strengthen our military, as I said, with 100,000 more troops and raise our military funding from about 3.8% of our gross domestic product to about 4%. That doesn't sound like a lot, but it's worth about $40 billion of additional equipment and care for our veterans. I'd also see us strengthening our economy. Now, how are you going to do that? You know that there are a lot of people talking about this issue right now, and everybody's considering that the economy may be kind of fragile right now. And they're looking at the subprime mortgage crisis. It's, you know, that sounds awfully detached when you call it the subprime mortgage crisis. It's a home ownership crisis where people are having their homes foreclosed on them. It's a real human crisis, and it has major consequences for the overall credit markets that we all participate in. And so it's an enormous concern. And so as we look at how we strengthen our economy, you have Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, I think almost every one of them, intent on raising taxes. Hillary Clinton says it's time for corporations to pay their fair share. Well, that's a euphemism for get their taxes up. She wants to raise taxes on citizens. She wants to raise taxes on corporations. She wants to raise taxes for Social Security. And she wants to raise the death tax. In my opinion, the wrong way to grow an economy is taking more money away from the people. It's instead to let people keep their money. I think it's fundamentally unfair that people are taxed when they earn their money, when they save their money, and when they die. And so I'll kill the death tax once and for all. And as you probably have heard, I have a special tax rate for people who are saving their money. For anybody earning $200,000 a year or less, the tax rate on interest, dividends, and capital gains, all your savings, would be absolutely zero. Allow our citizens to save their money for retirement, for a home, for a car, for education, for their children, without getting taxed on those savings. By the way, I was talking about this, and I knew that John Edwards had a plan where you can save $250 a year tax-free. Yeah, that was my reaction too. And I was talking about that, and I said, look, his plan wouldn't allow you to get a retirement with that money, or to pay for education, or to get a down payment on a house. And I was in Nevada, Iowa, and Bill Dio in the audience said it wouldn't pay for his haircut either. So I want a tax plan that lets all of our citizens save the money they need for their future. I also believe that to strengthen our economy, we got to be serious, finally, in putting together an energy policy that gets us off of foreign oil. We talk about it. It's talk, talk, talk. If you watch Washington and politicians, I mean, I know I've been in politics for 4 years now, as a governor, 4 years, not long enough to become badly infected, is how I put it. You listen to politicians, and so I guess I have to call myself one, but it's talk, 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 with so little that ever gets done. We've been talking about becoming energy independent and ridding ourselves of our dependence on foreign oil since Jimmy Carter. And what have we really done? 60% of our energy is still coming from outside the country. And I want to actually get us to a point where we are energy secure and energy independent. Does it include ethanol? Of course it does. Probably cellulosic ethanol and biodiesel and biofuel and maybe even blue-green algae-produced biofuels. And it's probably also going to be nuclear power, as well as coal, clean burning coal, liquefied coal. Probably more gas as well for our power plants. So we have additional sources that come from here. And it also means much greater efficiency. There's a new study out today by a great consulting firm called McKinsey & Company, where they look at ways to dramatically reduce use of energy in our country just by energy-saving devices and timers and meters and appliances that are more energy efficient. We can become energy independent. I will get the job done. You see, where you come from, most of you in this room are in the private sector, one way or another. And you know that if you don't get the job done, your employer will ultimately send you to the line, the unemployment line. Because in the private sector, you don't get the job done. Talk is worth nothing. But in politics, guys just talk and talk and talk. If you can talk well, why would we get you elected? Well, it's time to have somebody who knows something about the private sector and getting the job done. And I will get America on track to become energy secure and energy independent. Now let me mention one more area of strength. I mentioned strengthening our military and strengthening our economy. It's also critical that we strengthen our families. How do you do that? Well, one way you do that is by making sure that our kids understand that before they start having babies, they should get married. That a child deserves a mother and a father. And as you know, I also believe very strongly that marriage is a relationship between a man and a woman. And I'll fight for a constitutional amendment to make sure that marriage is defined that way. I want you to know how optimistic I am about the future of this country. This is the greatest nation on earth. When I say great, I mean it's a nation that's not only good, but a nation that's strong. We need to make sure that we maintain that greatness in both dimensions. I mentioned the other night that I get irritated when I listen to John Edwards talk about two Americas. We disagree on issues from time to time. People come from different walks of life and have differences between us, but we are united as a nation. And we come together when we're called upon to sacrifice in times of great need. This is one of those times. Americans stand together. I remember it was a couple of years ago when I was governor of Massachusetts. I got a call, I think it was from my chief of staff, saying that there was a soldier coming home from Iraq, and would I go to the airport to meet him? And the answer was, of course. And then she said, he's not coming home in the passenger compartment, he's coming home in the baggage compartment. And he was coming home in a casket. And so I went to the airport, and we drove out on the tarmac, the runway, or the area where the planes come in, tarmac area, and pulled up the car, and I got out, and we had a couple of our soldiers there from the National Guard, including the Adjutant General, as I recall. And it was a U.S. Air flight that came in, big commercial airliner. The people got off, flooded into the terminal, big terminal there, great big glass wall there. And then they began the conveyor belt with all the luggage coming off, piece after piece. And I stood there wondering when the casket would come. And finally, all the luggage was gone. And as I recall, a couple of soldiers got up into the aircraft. And the next thing I knew, that casket was coming down the conveyor belt. And they stopped and draped a flag on it, as I recall, at some point, and then put it in the hearse. And I put my hand on my heart as I saw that casket come down the conveyor belt, and the soldiers next to me saluted and stood at attention. And as the casket was being put in the hearse, I happened just to glance up at the terminal, at those windows. And there against those windows were people who'd come off that aircraft and people from the terminal, all standing there at the windows with their hands on their hearts. This is a nation that comes together. We make mistakes as a nation. We've not been perfect, but we always act from the purpose of doing what we believe is right and good. America is a great and generous nation, and a good nation. Mistakes are always possible, and people may disagree about policy. But one thing, don't ever let people tell you. Don't ever let people tell you that we're not acting out of the goodness of our hearts, because we are. We do what we believe is right for ourselves, for others, and for the liberty of the world. If I'm elected president, and I need your help for that to happen, I want you to make sure that you'll do everything necessary to get me elected. That's why they've handed out those little cards for you to fill out. I want you to come to the caucuses and vote 3 or 4 times. But I want you to know that I will keep America strong. I will fight to strengthen our military. I'll fight to make sure that our economy is strong. And I'll fight to preserve the values of marriage, the values in homes, such that our kids can have the skills and the heart and the passion to continue to keep America the hope of the world. Thank you so much. Now you may, if this is Iowa, and I know it is, you may have some questions you want to ask me. My experience is that Iowans have plenty of questions, and so we'll let you just raise a hand and somebody will bring you a microphone. They're all over here. The guys with the microphones will make the choices there. The reason we want you to get the microphone is because I guess some people are filming this, and if you got a mic, then we can hear the question. Derek, hand out the mic.
There was an article in our local newspaper this morning, maybe you happened to see it or it was mentioned to you, that says GOP pro-choice group targets Romney with ad campaign. This is according to this article out of Washington, AP article, stating that they're going to challenge you on what they call, not me, but what they call in this article, this flip-flop on abortion. And they're going to run a full-page ad in the Des Moines Register, the Concord Monitor, and the New Hampshire Union Leader. My question is, I'd like to know from you how you're going to combat this type of smear tactics.
You know, it really is great that you can be defined by people attacking you in some respects. And, you know, I guess they just can't get over the fact that somebody who was effectively pro-choice, I've always personally opposed abortion, but I questioned what the role of government should be and said I would protect the current law, and that's a pro-choice position. When someone who's pro-choice becomes pro-life, the media and some people just can't get enough of it. You go the other direction and it's heralded like you made some great, wonderful discovery. But you become firmly pro-life, and people get all upset about it. My experience is pretty straightforward. It was all an interesting topic, and I laid out my position, theoretical in some respects, until I became governor, and a bill came to my desk that would have allowed the creation of new embryos, new life, solely for the purpose of destroying them, experimenting and destroying them. And I simply couldn't sign it. And we had a discussion with the people who were behind that bill, and I said, look, I just can't sign this bill. I said to my chief of staff, I'm just not able to do it. I'm pro-life. I wrote an op-ed piece in the Boston paper, said I'm pro-life, and I'm going to honor the promises I made to the people of the state. Every piece of legislation that came to my desk, I came down on the side of the sanctity of human life. Every single one. And when my term as governor was over, the Massachusetts Citizens for Life invited me to come to their banquet and receive an award, a leadership award for my contribution and my commitment to life as governor of Massachusetts. But you know, there's some people that do not want to forgive you for making a mistake. And the truth is, I was wrong. I saw that I was wrong. I admitted I was wrong, and I'm now pro-life. And you know, that's just the way it's going to be. I'm not going to apologize for following the same pathway Ronald Reagan followed. We're both pro-life. Thank you. Eric? No, you got a whole row here. Yes, sir. Hi. Look at that. You didn't know it was coming.
No, I didn't. Well, I'm an avid listener of talk radio. Okay, I listen to Glenn Beck, I listen to Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, all those. Right at the primary, the source of my news. There's been a lot of talk on the border. They passed the law, you know, Bush signed it to put the border fence up. Congress hasn't appropriated the funds to do it. We've had all the talk about what's going on in Laredo. My question is, what are you going to do if Bush still has not put up this border fence, if the Congress has still not built it? What are you going to do to protect our southern border?
Well, there are two things, and this that I think are really critical to stop the flow of large numbers of illegal aliens into the country. And let me underscore as I say that, that's just illegal. We have a legal immigration system, which in my view is important to our country. I welcome people coming here legally, becoming citizens, having visas, and so forth. I hope people are listening in, because, you know, some people who are on the other side of this issue, who favor illegal immigration, keep on characterizing my position and the position of others like me as being anti-immigrant. Nothing can be further from the truth. Look, I am pro-immigrant, legal immigrant. That's been the source of great vitality and strength of our country from the beginning. But I'm anti-illegal immigration. And yeah, a fence will make a difference, and Border Patrol agents to patrol the fence will make a difference. But there's something else we got to do too. And I was at the fence in San Diego. It's a double fence. It's about 10 feet high with maybe 100 or 200 yards between it. I asked the Border Patrol agents, how long does it take someone to get across that? They said about 40 seconds. I said, you're kidding. How do they get across so fast? They said, well, they make fences out of rebar fences, ladders out of rebar. They make these ladders. They throw the first ladder over the first fence. Then they take the second ladder and lay it up against that first fence. They go over, grab the rebar, go to the next one, and over that one. Takes about 40 seconds, and they're in the mall, right over the border in San Diego. And they said, you know, you're going to have to turn off the magnets. You're going to have to turn off the magnets if you want to stop illegal immigration. And I said, okay, what are the magnets? And they said, well, first of all, employers that knowingly or unknowingly hire people that are here illegally. They're coming over here, by and large, to get work. And I said, well, how are you going to do that? And I know the answer to that. The way we're going to stop people coming over the border to get work is by giving legal immigrants a card that identifies their name and has their picture and their work status. And you say to employers, if you want to hire someone that's not a U.S. citizen with a valid Social Security number, ask for their card. If they don't have one, you can't hire them. If they have one, then check it to make sure it's valid. If it is, you can hire them. If it's not, you can't. And if you hire people illegally, we're going to sanction you just like we do sanction people and companies that don't pay their taxes. So we're going to get serious about enforcing employment rules. The other thing we need to do is, okay, yeah. The other thing is to change the sanctuary state of mind that exists. And that is, I vehemently oppose the idea of sanctuary cities that say they will not enforce U.S. law. I will cut back federal funding to cities that don't enforce the law, that are sanctuary cities. And by the way, there are also states, and you heard us in our debate the other night, and I was a little surprised in getting the real facts here. Actually, Governor Huckabee fought in favor of giving in-state tuition breaks to illegal aliens. That is something which I disagree with. I would cut back on federal funds to colleges that give out in-state tuition breaks to people who are here illegally. If we got enough money to give out breaks, let's give it out to U.S. citizens.
Amen.
And I wouldn't give out driver's licenses either to illegal aliens. This sanctuary state of mind that permeates our culture has got to change. We got to say we live by the rule of law. And I will fight to make sure we live by the rule of law, to make sure we have a fence, border patrol agents, an employment verification system. And I was on the phone yesterday with I better not mention his name, but a United States senator. He's not committed to anybody in the race. But he said, look, you could do a lot of this as president. A lot of things you don't have to wait for legislation. You're authorized to do a lot of these things. You can take action and make a huge difference. And I will do that, and I'll also get the legislation as that's needed. Thank you so much. Hi, it looks like there's another microphone on this side of the room. Amazing.
Hi, Mr. Romney.
Hi.
Right now, Bush is in negotiations with Iraqi leaders regarding a long-term military commitment to secure both Iraq and the U.S. My question is, do you support George Bush in his efforts to establish a long-term military presence in Iraq to keep us safe, even if it takes years?
Let me tell you what I do believe about Iraq. I do not believe we should have a permanent military presence in Iraq, and I don't think we should announce to the world we want to have a permanent military presence in Iraq. We have permanent bases very close and in the region, and we have such a base in Kuwait, Qatar, and there are other places from which we can defend our interests in the region and secure peace. But I do not believe that we should precipitously withdraw from Iraq, and let me tell you why. For me, the key in Iraq right now is making sure that Al-Qaeda and people like Hezbollah and other groups like that do not establish a safe haven or a base from which they could recruit and finance and launch attacks against us and our friends. And the surge is working to prevent Al-Qaeda from establishing such a safe haven. As a matter of fact, as you've now been reading and as more and more people are learning, the Sunnis, a large portion of the population of Iraq, has been working with our military to help get rid of Al-Qaeda amongst them. Al-Qaeda overplayed their hand, was too aggressive, too domineering, too demanding, and the Sunnis are rejecting him and working with us. This is a very positive development for their country and for our success there, because we do not want to have, Al-Qaeda in charge in a major region of the world. If they had a major piece of Iraq, or all of Iraq, let me tell you, Iraq would make Afghanistan and the launch terror from that country look like child's play. And so it's important to me that we get the job done. And I will not walk out of Iraq until that job is done. Thank you. Who's ever got the mic? Go ahead. Yeah. Chad? You're going to read it off a text. Isn't this great?
Yeah. Thank you for taking my question.
Tell Hillary hi, will you? I'm just kidding.
As you know, tomorrow is World AIDS Day, and I participated in a prayer vigil over at the University of Northern Iowa on Tuesday. And I learned that Governor Huckabee released a plan yesterday, just in time for World AIDS Day, to fight HIV and AIDS. In it, he said that he would support providing treatment to people living with HIV and having it covered before they get very sick. This is what doctors recommend in order to reduce the high costs associated with complications and to save lives. When you are president, will you make sure that HIV-positive people can get treatment they need before they get sick here in the United States?
Well, I'm glad that Governor Huckabee raised that point. I've not only talked about a plan for the nation for every citizen to have health insurance, man, woman, and child, but I also did it in my state. I believe I'm the only governor in America that's actually put in place a plan that gets everybody health insurance. And so I'm pretty proud of the fact that everybody else is talking about it, but I've actually done it. And I did it not by having a government takeover of healthcare, not by having some new big tax scheme to tax a bunch of people for government insurance, not by giving people government health insurance, but instead by helping people get private, free market insurance. And that's what we did in our state. It's a model in some respects that I think other states can learn from and borrow from. I would not impose it on every other state, but I'd create incentives, both carrots and sticks, to encourage states to reform their markets and to get all their citizens insured. So my plan gets every citizen insured within 4 years of its passage. And that is something I'm going to work hard to accomplish, and that will cover people not only with HIV/AIDS, but people with hypertension and people with diabetes, and with all the diseases and conditions we have in this country, because we learned something sort of interesting in our state. It's kind of an interesting experience. There was a healthcare chain or a hospital called Boston Medical Center that cares for about 100,000 people a year that don't have insurance. And they took 20,000 of those people and gave them a card which looked like they had insurance. I think they were sort of giving people the impression they were insured. And then they wanted to see how these people behaved, whether they behaved the same or differently than people that didn't have the card. Because the card directed the person to go to a clinic where they could get primary care and had a doctor, and they could get prescription drugs at the clinic. What they found was that people with a card, as you might imagine, went to the primary care doctor more often than people that didn't have one. They went to the doctor more often, they got the prescription drugs they needed, and then they looked at the hospital bills of the people with the cards and found out that the hospital costs were 1/3 as large for the people that had the card as they were for the people who didn't. Because by getting good preventative care, where the doctor gives you a physical exam and gets you the drugs you need to prevent a condition from becoming an acute crisis, you can actually keep people not only healthier, but save them and everybody else a lot of money. And so I'm a big believer in getting everybody in our nation health insurance that they can afford and that can stay with them as long as they want it. They don't have to worry about if they lose jobs or change a job, that they'll lose their insurance. Instead, everybody gets insurance. That's my view. Thank you. Looks like someone's coming right down here.
Governor Romney, last year I traveled to Tanzania, and one of the things that devastated me to see there was that there was an absence of the breadwinning generation there. They had died of AIDS. For most part, it was grandparents raising grandchildren. About 1/3 of the people that have AIDS worldwide, and there are 33 million people worldwide that have AIDS, are in Africa. Not only what you will do here in the United States to help make sure that people have access to that treatment, but what will you do worldwide to increase the funding? Currently, we spend about 600 to 800 million a year as the United States. And yesterday, Governor Huckabee said that he would increase, that we need to increase that amount so that we can fight that pandemic before it spreads and we turn the tide on that. What will you commit to do?
Well, there's no question but that we care about conditions in the world of poverty and sickness and disease. But I have to be honest with you, and that is that my first priority is with Americans and caring for our citizens. And that will be my first responsibility as President of the United States. I will also, as a member of a generous nation, work hard to alleviate suffering and pain and poverty around the world. And we can do that. There's a book written by a fellow named Jeffrey Sachs called The End of Poverty, which lays out a prescription of how you go country by country and develop strategies to help those countries eliminate poverty. In some cases it relates to disease. In some cases it relates to the conditions of water in their nation. In some cases it relates to excessive debt that they've taken on. And so we develop strategies nation by nation. And I will work with other nations of the world and have called for a partnership of peace and prosperity that brings together other nations and ourselves to help nation by nation make these kinds of adjustments and improvements. And I very much believe in that effort. And but I'm not going to give you a specific number today as to how much we'll spend, because I got to put that whole budget together. And it was one of the things I thought was great in the debate the other night was Tom Tancredo's point that it's always attractive to talk about all the programs that everybody wants to talk about, and everybody says, oh yeah, we'll give you more for that, more for that, more for that, and that's how Washington works, because when you get finished, we got more for everything. Except we're weighing down our future. And I want to make sure that we have the money that we need so that we're not spending more than we actually take in. Thanks.
Governor Romney, a lot of countries are currently struggling with their illegal immigration problems. Europe, particularly Germany, Spain. And I'd like to propose a solution here in the United States, and I don't know how you'll feel about it. I haven't heard about this too much, and that is that we issue both citizen and non-citizen birth certificates. That if parents cannot prove that they are citizens in the United States legally at the time of the birth of their child, that the child is issued a non-citizen birth certificate.
So your point is, if somebody is not a citizen,
right,
and they have a child here, that the child wouldn't be a citizen?
Correct.
Well, it's an interesting idea, but the question is that legally possible or not? Because the Constitution may or may not forbid that. That depends on, there are two different views as to whether that's a constitutional issue or not a constitutional issue. I'll tell you, my personal preference is this, and that is, we stop illegal immigration by securing our border and having an employment verification system. I think we also ought to have a policy that says that if somebody has been born here from parents that have come here illegally, that does not mean that they can bring in their whole family with them afterwards. And that's a principle known as chain migration. And sometimes the term is referred to, not very elegantly, as an anchor baby. The baby gets born here and then the whole family comes in behind them. And that's a policy we can change, certainly without having to confront whether there's a constitutional issue or not. So I think I deal with the issue in the way I described. Change the policy and secure the border. Thank you. Hi.
Ron Paul and Mike Huckabee are very passionate about returning the powers endowed by the Constitution to the states. What's your stance on that?
Well, let's look issue by issue. Likewise, as a governor, I'm somebody who believes very deeply in federalism, which is a principle that says we let states deal with issues that are states' issues. And we have an amendment to the Constitution which says that those powers that are not specifically enumerated to the federal government will be kept within the states. And yet there is, from time to time, an encroachment on those powers by the federal government. It's something that we've come to expect at this stage, and it's something which we have to reverse. We have to recognize that the states are the place where we're closest to the people and where people have the greatest democratic impact. And therefore, I would like to see, for instance, Roe v. Wade overturned. Yeah. And by overturning Roe v. Wade, you would effectively be returning to the people and the states the ability to create their own legislation as it relates to abortion and life. There is one place where I think the federal government has a role, and I disagree with my other colleagues on the Republican platform on this issue. I believe we should have a federal amendment to the Constitution that defines marriage as between a man and a woman. Yeah. And that's... You might say, well, that violates your principle of federalism. Why have one standard for the whole nation? And the reason for that is pretty straightforward. And that is that marriage is a status, if you will. If you get married one place and you move somewhere else, why, the perception of the community is that you're married. And I believe that the ideal setting for raising a child is where there's a male and a female involved, and therefore it's appropriate for society to define marriage in that way. And therefore, I want a national standard of the status of marriage. But if there are any specific issues that you'd like to talk about on a state versus federal basis, I'm happy to. But I'll tell you, issue after issue. I mean, I was out of Nevada, and it's hard to believe. They told me 90% of the land in Nevada is owned or managed by the federal government. That's kind of tough, isn't it? Can you imagine such a thing? And the federal government can get a little grabby. And my experience as a governor is that you want to leave to the governors the ability to manage their states in the best way they can for the needs of the people, and if they don't do a good job, they get fired. So my health care plan for the nation, for instance, is not like Hillary Clinton's in a lot of ways. Hers requires taxes, new taxes, mine doesn't. Hers gives people government insurance. I say no way, let people get free market insurance. And one of the most important differences is she says she has the answer for everybody, that she's going to tell the states how to do the program. A one-size-fits-all Washington-based program. I say no, 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 no. Let the states create their own plans and programs. We, the federal government, will encourage that, stimulate it, give them the financial flexibility to do it, but let each state create their own the plans to meet the problems of their own citizens. Thanks so much.
Governor, your religion is a concern to many people. I'd like to get your response to that question.
Well, thank you. And I get asked that now and then, so I appreciate it. Let me tell you. Uh-oh, class is about to start, right? Thanks, you guys. Unfortunately, thanks to the students here, Kirkwood, for being here. Appreciate you being here. Thanks, you guys. Well, first of all, I'm proud of my faith, as you can imagine, and it's the faith of my fathers, and it informs a lot of how I live my life. But I'm also an individual who believes that in this country, you're not going to see people choosing their candidate based upon which church they go to. And I subscribe to something Abraham Lincoln wrote about and spoke about when he was a young man, only 28 years old. He spoke at something which is now referred to as the Lyceum Address. And in this address, he said that Americans should subscribe to defending the Constitution, abiding by the rule of law, abiding by the Declaration of Independence and all of its principles, that we should fight for those things. And he called this, in an unusual term, he called it America's political religion. And I want to assure you that if I become President of the United States, when I place my hand on the Bible, I believe I am subscribing to America's political religion. And that means that I will follow the rule of law and the Constitution. And the Constitution on this topic is pretty clear. In Article 6 of the Constitution, it says, no religious test shall ever be required for qualification to office in these United States. And far be it from people in this country to impose a test which the Constitution goes by. Thank you. Okay, I guess I get one more. Yes, sir.
Yes, the snowman had to leave. Apparently it wasn't costume day, but they did write a question, so I want to ask you this. One of the international community's biggest priorities right now is crafting a new treaty to combat global warming. There's going to be a kind of a new Kyoto agreement, and it actually will start in Bali here early December. So my question is, how would you address this challenge on an international basis, and how should the United States play a role in solving this global challenge of global warming?
A couple things. One, I described what are, in my view, some of the most important things we can do to dramatically reduce our greenhouse gas emissions all by ourselves. So the new sources of energy that are non-CO2 emitting, much greater efficiency in our cars, homes, appliances, businesses, those two things combined will dramatically reduce the growth and perhaps even reduce the absolute level of our CO2 emissions at some point. And those are things I do for, as I said, three major reasons. And different people choose different reasons for liking those ideas. One is to give ourselves better security so that we don't have to worry about buying oil from people that don't like us. Two is strengthening our economy so we don't send over $1 billion a day outside our country. And three is to reduce greenhouse emissions and affect global warming. So we have those three reasons for taking those actions by ourselves. Now, what happens if we decide to put in place a regime to put caps of some kind and targets and so forth? Well, I think one important principle I want to make is this, and that is we don't call it America warming, we call it global warming. And that being the case, I want to make sure that those kinds of discussions are held on a global basis, not with okay, what's America going to do when everybody else sits back and says they're doing nothing? And what was wrong with Kyoto is it said, okay, America, you put in place these caps, but China, who is now the biggest greenhouse gas emitter in the world, you don't have to do anything. I want China and India, by the way, they're competing for our jobs. I don't want to put on our employers and our employees costs which then the Chinese and the Indians don't have to pay to make our jobs even less competitive. So I will work on a global basis to get other nations to combine to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions in a way that is fair to us and to the other people in the world. It's not going to be easy because the Chinese say, well, we're still an emerging economy. It's not fair. You've already got all your growth. Yeah, but they're building coal plants. How often is it now? I heard one a week. Coal plants, you heard every 2 days. I'd heard every 2 days as well, so I haven't verified the number. But one a week, every 2 days? Do I hear every day from somebody? There we go. Yeah. 2 a day. There we go. So I'm here. It's like an auction here, but but they're building a lot of coal plants, all right? And they're putting out a lot, not only a lot of pollutants, but also a lot of CO2. And we're going to have to work globally to put together a plan to reduce this, if you will, these gases, which very may well be causing dramatic warming of our planet. Look, I'm told that I have to let you go when they had to go early because the bell rang, but I want to say thanks to you for being willing to spend some time with me. I look forward to being here again. This is, I think, my 4th visit to Lynn County. I want to note, I want to note as well that I'm really confident in our future, and I think it's critical that we remember how important it is that America remain the strongest nation on earth. And that was brought home to me some months ago by the former Prime Minister of Israel. His name is Shimon Peres. He was in Boston. Someone asked him, what do you think about the conflict in Iraq? And he said, before I respond to that, he said, I have to place it in context. He said, in the history of the world, America is unique. In the history of the world, he said, whenever there's been war, the nation that wins takes land from the nation that loses. Because land has always been the source of value on the planet. One nation in history has laid down hundreds of thousands of lives and taken no land. No land from Germany, no land from Japan, no land from Korea. America. America is unique in history by virtue of the sacrifice we have made in blood and lives for freedom, for ourselves and for freedom-loving people around the world. It is essential that America remains strong. It's essential that the next leader of this country knows how to keep America strong, not just talk about it, but actually do it. It's essential in America that we strengthen our economy, that we have good jobs for our citizens, that we strengthen our military to protect us, and that we strengthen the American family. I will do it with your help. Thank you so much.
Snag the malt box. I'm going to unplug you guys real quick.